Hi everyone, it's Kathy. Thank you so much for joining me. Today I'll be creating a mini slimline card with some super cute fuzzy spiders. The products I'll be using are the Slimline Scribbles background stamp, the fuzzy spider stamp set, and the Selfies die set. I started working on my background first with a piece of white cardstock that is about 3 3/8 by 6 3/8, just so I could have a little border around my background when I put my full card together. I used my anti-static powder tool on my cardstock. Then I inked up the Slimline Scribbles background stamp with Versamark ink, placed my cardstock on top, and used a piece of scratch paper on top of that to make sure I got a nice clean impression. Next, I poured some detail white embossing powder over the top of that panel and then heat set it until the powder was nice and melted. Once it cooled off a little bit, I started doing a little bit of ink blending. I started out with Orange Twist and I did opposite ends with the orange, and then I brought in some Glitz ink to fill in that center so I could have that gradient from orange to yellow and then back down to orange. Once I had all of the ink blending done, I brought in a dry cloth to buff off that ink to get the embossed image to really shine through. Then it was time to work on my little fuzzy spiders. I die cut 3 of the selfie frames from white cardstock, and I kept all of the pieces so that I could just put them all back together. I used a little bit of temporary adhesive on the back of the medium size square and placed that in my MISTI. I wanted to add a spider web up in the top corner, so I placed that on the stamp and picked it up with my MISTI lid and used Memento Tuxedo black ink to stamp that web. Next, I placed the spider where I wanted him to be, and I used some bright fuchsia ink so I could have a little purple spider. Once I had that little guy stamped out and the ink dried a little bit, I created a mask for the spider just so that I wouldn't end up with the whites of his eyes having ink in there. When I cut out that mask, I wasn't too picky. I actually just cut kind of a very rough oval. I wasn't worried about the little fuzzy bits on his body because, again, I just wanted to make sure that his eyes were masked off. I used Twilight ink on the bottom of the square just so my little spider would be grounded, and then I finished up the top of the square with Melon Ice ink. Next, I grabbed the smallest little square, and again, I put temporary adhesive on the back so it would stay in place in my MISTI. And I wanted the little spider to wear a witch hat, and I wanted to do a little bit of masking, so I stamped my witch hat first. When I cut out the mask for the witch hat, I cut pretty much on the stamped line to make sure I didn't get any weird separation between the hat and the spider. For this little spider, I stamped him out using VersaFine Nocturne ink, and then I did another mask for him for his body and placed that on top before I did the ink blending with the same gray and green ink. After I had the ink blending done, I removed the masks so I could color in the little witch hat, and I chose Copic markers to closely match the purple ink that I used to stamp the other spider. I'll be sure to have all of the products that I used, including the Copic markers, listed in the description box below for you. Once I was done coloring in that little witch hat, I moved on to the third and final spider, and again, I used temporary adhesive to hold my panel in place. And as I was playing around and placing this spider on this panel, I thought I needed to have something else on that panel. So I grabbed the other spider web with the spider hanging from the bottom, and I flipped it upside down just so I could have the spider webs up in the top corners of this particular panel. I used Memento Tuxedo black ink to stamp that web there. Then I cleaned off the stamp and repositioned it on the other side of the rectangle so that I could have those webs in both corners. After I had those spider webs stamped up, I positioned the spider where I wanted him to be, and again inked him up with the bright purple ink. I did the same ink blending on this panel as I did the other 2 panels with the spiders. After all of my spider panels were done, it was time to start putting my card together. I used liquid glue to adhere the frames from the selfie die set onto a piece of black cardstock that I had cut just a little bit larger. I wanted to have that outside frame to coordinate with my note card, which is going to be a black note card. Once I had the frames adhered in place on the black cardstock, I used liquid glue to adhere the panels with the spiders on the inside of the frame. Once that was done, I used my tape runner to adhere my ink blended panel onto my note card, which started out at 6.5 by 7. I scored it at 3.5 on the 7-inch side, so my finished card is 3.5 by 6.5. And then I just used my tape runner to adhere the larger frames on the front of the card, and decided to pop up my little spider with the witch hat, so I used some black foam squares on the back of that and just adhered him right into place. To finish up the card, I decided to use my black Nuvo drops and just added little drops all over the front just to fill in a little bit of space. And I thought I was done, but then I came back and thought I really needed to add something to the bottom of those larger frames. So I used the sentiments from the Fuzzy Spider set and stamped those right on the bottom of those frames. The other thing that I did was I used a black fine tip marker to color in the pupils of the purple spiders so that they would be black instead of purple. And that's it. That finishes up my card for today. Thank you so much for joining me. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you've not yet subscribed, we'd love it if you would. And don't forget to ring the bell so you're notified every time a new video is posted. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.